Welcome back. We're going to talk now about that landmark legal ruling where former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has had his 2020 rape conviction overturned in New York due to a crucial mistake made by the trial judge.
Yes, so the courts found he did not receive a fair trial after the judge called witnesses whose accusations were not part of the case against him. So Weinstein was found guilty of raping and sexually assaulting 2 women, but is now entitled to a retrial.
Well, earlier, GB News spoke to showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci about this.
Weinstein was sentenced in 2020. Many people saw that as actually a victory for the Me Too movement. You know, finally he's been locked away. He's not going to be a free man, so he's still already in prison, serving another sentence for 16 years. But the fact that now this has been overturned, actually, it's said to a lot of women, actually, your stories don't matter, even if you're going to court to talk about it. With Harvey Weinstein, in his defence, his team are quite happy with this verdict because it means actually he can actually now go on trial and have his say, because during the trial he didn't really get a chance to say his side of the story. So now if there is going to be a retrial, he will get to say what happened in these kind of situations that he's been accused of.
So let's unpack this a little bit more with broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn, who knows the American legal system. So, Andrew, just explain to us then, simply, about why it was decided that he didn't get a fair trial. Because, of course, victims' lawyers, his accusers' lawyers, are saying that's completely untrue, and courts routinely admit evidence of other uncharged acts.
Absolutely, and what's really important is shed more light and less heat on the subject, because it's horrendous for the victims. A number of people have come forward. The basic law is this, is that everybody's entitled to a fair trial. What that means is certain evidence is allowed in a court and certain evidence isn't. And it varies around the world. So, for example, in this particular case, what they held, and we only ever get the headlines in the media. They only say, oh, they've let him off. Well, that's not what happens. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. There is a due process that needs to be followed as to evidence. And the evidence which is relevant is that which is part of that particular accusation. So you say, well, does it relate to this particular crime? And if it does, to prove that, that's what's going to happen. What happened in this particular case, the judge on appeal, they found that there were egregious errors because certain evidence from various other people was admitted. And what they said is that we conclude that the trial court erroneously admitted testimony of uncharged alleged prior sexual acts against persons other than the complainants. So, in other words, if it happened to somebody else, they're basically saying that it happened to this particular victim.
But complainants' lawyers say that is a regular thing that happens in court.
The evidence says it has to basically be, what has this got to do with this particular case? If somebody, for example, had a history of stealing, they stole a Mars bar from a particular corner shop, I know it's trivial, but you get the point. They stole a Mars bar. It doesn't necessarily mean they stole a Mars bar in the case they're accused of. So what happened here is that he hadn't been convicted of these offences with these other people who were put forward as witnesses. All that had happened is they came forward to look at that sort of side.
Well, we have that here in the UK, don't we? Defendants, a jury in a trial are not told about defendants' past criminal history because it may influence their decision.
Absolutely, and that's the important thing. And it's very easy and it's gut reaction because they're such appalling crimes. And the victim stories are so compelling that we basically become judged in the media. We turn around and say, it must be awful, how dare they let him off? The reality is everybody's entitled to a fair trial. It needs to go through due process. Now, that due process is different on a state-by-state basis. I know you were talking about what happens in California could be different to New York.
So he's serving a 16-year sentence in Los Angeles for sex crimes. So will this give his legal team there renewed impetus to try and get that overturned?
Well, they will have impetus anyway, so they will turn around. Or lawyers are always looking for that sort of stuff. It's always about evidence. It's about, has this gone through the due process? And the difficulty, as I say, is the headlines can be quite misleading because you don't get all the hours and days, sometimes months of testimony which goes into this. So the courts have to decide, is it fair? It's essential. It's a fundamental right, human right, that everybody's entitled to a fair trial, however horrendous the crime is. That, or the alleged crime. So that needs to happen. What they have is what's called propensity. And the propensity laws in California are different to what they are in New York. They're a bit more lax. So if somebody says there's a particular pattern of behaviour, they might offer that, and it depends on the judge. They have more discretion as to what evidence they need to do. But the key in the headline is you must must follow that process. If you don't follow that process, then you're opening yourself up to appeal, which is what happened in this case.
Could this mean in future, though, that actually, because of course it was the Weinstein case that sparked the whole Me Too movement, has it not set it back? Does this not end up discouraging complainants from coming forward because they don't think they'll be listened?
Oh, no, they will absolutely be heard, and not at all. It's essential that people come forward and talk about things. What they have to do, though, and lawyers need to make sure that they follow the due process. You don't want to make sure there's an argument for the other side to turn around and say the evidence which was admitted was not right. So you need to follow that. That's the thing. In this particular case, and it was held on appeal, those are the findings as a fact, that this evidence should not have been admitted, and as a result of it admitting it, he didn't get a fair trial. I suspect it will go for a retrial, and then there'll be arguments there, well, hang on, it's all been in the media and everything, he may not get a fair trial again, is what they will argue. But the reality is this, you have to follow process, and people who are victims should come forward. OK, well, I mean, that's why this case is important, because Weinstein was the catalyst for the Me Too movement, which brought a lot of prosecutions this side of the pond as well. But